Come and join iLearn IAS and feel the difference.
Hi all, this is Shinas from iLearn IAS. Today I have Garima Lohia with me, who secured second rank in this year's civil service examination. She has scored exemplary well in her GS as well as in interview. So let's talk about her preparation strategies and all. Hi Garima, welcome to session.
Sir. Thank you so much.
Garima, I was going through your mark sheet. Your GS2, GS4 marks are exemplary good. So let's start from that particular point. First of all, take GS2. So GS2, you scored 131.
Yes, sir.
That's exemplary, very good mark this year. Now, what was your strategy for GS2?
So when my results did not come out for the mains, if I have cleared prelims or not, during that time I utilized my 20 days to collect good examples which can be used all over the 4 papers. So for example, I remember there's a question in GS2 which talked about how the people with special abilities, they need a lot of they face a lot of difficulty, and how the infrastructure should be made a lot of special people friendly abled. So in that I started the answer by writing about the recent case of Sudha Chandran ma'am, how she was forced to remove her prosthetic limb and pass it through the security. So I started it with a very emotional story. So what I wanted was that for every section, for example, for children, for education, health, specially abled, I have such emotional stories, 3 or 4, which I can start my answers with or conclude my answers with, so that it looks very personalized.
So within 2-3 lines itself, you used to bring a very good example, which is very live, and you already collected it and made it ready with you.
Yes.
Okay. Now, when it comes to GS2 paper, we can see there is polity and constitution part is there, then we have the social justice part is there, then we have the IR part is there.
Right.
So with respect to constitution and polity, your predominant reading material and focus might be Lakshmikant along with the current affairs.
Right,
is there anything extra that you did for that part?
So for the polity and constitution part, I did Lakshmikant, and I also did the analysis part in Lakshmikant that we generally don't read for prelims because it has a lot of case studies. But I made sure that I write down the case study in one place and I learn them by heart. I used a lot of case studies extensively, and I think that would have made a difference. So case studies is one thing I did. I also collected more case studies from some online websites. So for everything, for electoral bonds or for parliamentary democracy, everything, whatever election, the case study related to that, I collected them at one place, and then I also went through the PT 365 mains for the current affair for polity part.
Then the social justice and the governance part, very few questions normally comes there, but again you need to write good answers to get good marks over there.
Yes,
so over there also, I think the strategy of having examples and even statics might work there, right?
Yes, sir. So for governance, every word that is mentioned in the paper,
syllabus,
transparency, accountability, I made sure I had excellent definitions which I learned by heart. And then I also made sure I have diagrams for that. So for everything, for a citizen-centric administration, I would make a diagram.
Okay.
And there is a website, The Better India, and which talks about the work done in the field of administration. So in that initial 20 days itself, I collected a lot of examples of the work done by different IAS officers, and I used it in GS2, GS4 equally. Okay.
Then with respect to IR, so what was your approach to IR questions?
Sir, IR, I took current affair classes from Dipin Damodran sir, and his material was the only material I referred. I did not have the time to go through anything else, so that is it I did for IR.
Okay, so your GS2 preparation, if you look at, it is not the conventional way of going through some materials from institutes and all. It is more of a personalized, where you made sure that you have proper definition, along with that proper diagrams are there, then you had the good examples from each of them. So that's an excellent strategy. Okay, now let's come to GS4. 141 marks, exemplary good. So GS4, what was your strategy?
Sir, I think GS4 also, I did not take it in a very mechanical way, because I remember I talked to my friends how to attempt the paper, and I got guidelines that you should make a stakeholder diagram that we generally make, but I did not want to make my paper look very repetitive and boring, because this is the format in which the examiner must have checked previous 100 papers. So I tried to make it very personalized. I used a stakeholder approach in, let's say, one case study only, and in the case study, I made sure that I provide something for every stakeholder. That even if there is a person who is not given a lot of emphasis in the case study, I provide something for him also in the case study. And
so you made it more inclusive,
yes,
by identifying every member in the stakeholder,
yes,
and also you didn't want to go for the same repetitive model.
Right.
So one thing that people normally used to say that, okay, let's have a framework like this and apply that framework everywhere. So you don't want to do that. You want to have a personal touch your answer.
Yes.
So in framework, whenever it's possible, you bring framework, but in other places, you provide the other provisions, right? Yeah, that's interesting. But again, to get 141, you should have scored extremely well, not only in the case study part, but also in the initial, the definition part also. So, like, what made you to sure that you know where you adopted more of learning the definitions and all, or it was more of an example aspect?
I remember we learn a lot of theories, deontology, utilitarian, that we are told to use in all the theories. So apart from that, I also used examples from Ramayana, Mahabharata, because I read it specifically for the purpose of GS4, that I'll use examples from that. So I used instances from that. So these are the kind of things that I used. Apart from just writing definitions and diagrams, I try to have a example from mythology, from somewhere, that I can put in my every answer.
So this is something that I used to tell my students when it comes to interview also. Look back at our epics, Ramayana, Mahabharata, because we have very good examples over there, which when we give an example to the evaluator or in the interview board, they will definitely get impressed about your knowledge about what actually defines India. Nowadays, like, people, for becoming very cool and very urban in nature, they seldom look at our history, our Veda, our culture, which is a key element, not only with respect to the history of India, but also with respect to the present and the future. So I think this is something that the students should take away. Now, GS1, what about GS3 and GS1? More static in nature. So what did you do?
GS3 was a very difficult paper for me also, and because it's more difficult scoring in GS3. When I got a 94 in GS3. In GS3, people waste a lot of time preparing only for the economics part, because it's a dominant portion, but I think the other aspects are more easier to prepare in a short time and are more scoring. So security was one of my favorite portions. I read the website of IDSA, and I collected a lot of good examples and quotes and everything that we can write from that. And I also did the static portion. Every line I used to have a 2-page note that I can use, very current examples, some quote that Honorable Defense Minister has said, etc. I would write it down, and IDSA website I've used very extensively for that. For the environment portion, again, in that 20 days only, I tried to go through 2 or 3 editions of Down to Earth magazine, and then I collected very important highlighted portions, some good quotes and everything. It does not have to be very extensive 4-liner quote. It can be as simple as ecology is the permanent economy, because you will not have the time to write it down. So for example, I remember this quote I have used in every paper, 1, 2, 3 and 4, everywhere where I could not end an answer with a proper conclusion, I used to write it down.
Now, GS1, which is more static in nature, history. So over there, are you a person who really likes to remember the whole thing, or you are more into that example type? So how did you tackle that GS1? Like, people seldom, many times says that, sir, I couldn't remember all the things that is required in GS1. So what was your approach towards GS1?
GS1 was a very nice, I think GS1 is very scoring also, and it gives you a lot of opportunity because it has subjects that you have studied for prelims, including history, culture, everything. So for the art and culture part, I made sure I have diagrams for the temples part and everything. So I made sure I have diagrams, and I do art and culture previous year questions very extensively. Then for the sociology part, because the society part was, it always intrigued me. It had women, it had secularism, everything. So for that portion, I refer to a material from Vision IAS for the society part, and in that you have a lot of scope to use your creativity and use current relevant examples. You can use examples from movies. For example, in the women question, you can use how the media glorifies women in the other way and everything. It's very important to use those examples. In GS1, we generally ignore environment. We study geography, but we ignore environment, and there are a lot of questions that comes from that part also.
Okay. So you made sure that the questions which predominantly we think is from geography, you bring the environment dimension into that.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good. Now, see, since we started a discussion on mains, we went in that direction. Let's just talk about the prelims also. See, with respect to the prelims, we have the GS paper, we have the CSAT paper. You're always afraid of the CSAT, I know that. So how did you make sure that, okay, CSAT is going to be my forte? What all effort that you have taken for CSAT?
In my first time I got 65 and this year I've got 79. So it's not a big jump, it's only a 14-mark jump, but I'm telling you that I put at least 8 hours per day for 20 days continuous, only for CSAT exclusively, because I had that fear in mind of CSAT. So for CSAT, what you need to do is look at PYQs and then make a list of all the questions in reasoning, of the topics in reasoning, the topics in mathematics that are going to be asked. And for the maths part, I did not touch on the subjects or the topics that I find very difficult, permutation, combination questions, because I have lost touch with maths in 10th standard. So I did only the easier questions that I could do, age, ratio, proportion, percentage. These are the topics that I revised. So I did a lot of PYQs on that and then practice sums. And in reasoning is relatively easier for me. So I made sure that in those questions which are very easy, I will not even skip or miss one question. But for me, my savior has been reading comprehension. I think I attempt, if there are 35 questions of reading comprehension, I'll attempt 32. And the total number of questions that I attempted in CSAT was 40. Only 40. So it's a very risky game, but it has to be practiced.
But again, you are playing to your strength, right?
Yes.
You are good in that particular area, so you focused on that. Okay. Now, the first paper. As I was talking with you earlier, people have this tendency to go behind the current affairs, forgetting the static. So what are the things that you think that one aspirant who should look into while they are looking for the first paper in prelims?
If you run behind current affairs, I think till the day of prelims you will be very tensed that you have not prepared, because current affairs is never going to end. But for the confidence to come in prelims, I think static needs to be done by heart very thoroughly. And there are 3 to 4 subjects that you can target more. For example, polity, economics, environment, and even science and tech these days, more than history.
So for polity, you refer Lakshmi Khan.
Yes, I did Lakshmi
For economy?
Khan's. For economics, I did Mrunal sir's notes.
Then for geography?
So geography, I think geography, I was very weak at geography and there were a lot of few questions coming. So I did only the mapping part, the rivers, drainage, that part I did.
And then for environment?
I did PMFIS, the new book.
I don't know. Okay. Now, once you're done with the prelims and the mains, you are always continuing your preparation for the interview, hoping that you will make it to the interview. Now, over there, every person's personality is different, so the personality test is going to be very different. How do you make sure that your personality get reflected over there?
Sir, first thing I made sure was that not to take the feedback of every mock interview to my head, because initially I have a habit of speaking at a very fast pace. So I was told that you speak very fast and you need to slow it down. But in that process of slowing it down, my thinking capabilities started to get affected. So then in the end, I decided to stop taking feedbacks very seriously.
Be naturally,
be natural, be yourself. Unless and until there is a very striking thing that does not need to be done, that is being reflected in your personality, you need to be yourself only.
Okay. Now, with respect to that interview, to properly analyze your DAF, then go through a DAF and make sure that your answers differs from others. Not you are going to tell everyone what everyone is going to say. Now, with respect to that, you might have taken a lot of mock interviews, one-on-ones and all. Now, you scored and excelled well in your interview also. So, from that particular perspective, then at the same time, you might have seen people who are not scoring very good in PT, but despite the fact that they are very good people or very good personality.
Yes.
So, that how that 140 and 187, and how that difference? Because I personally know students who has good personality scoring 140. At the same time, finding it difficult to reach very good marks in personality. So what is your takeaway to all those who are going to attempt interviews in the future? What they should actually take care to score this high marks?
So one mistake that I committed initially was that focusing a lot on current affairs during the interview phase. I started to read 6 newspapers in one day, and in that I totally missed out on my DAF. And ultimately my interview was 80% DAF based. But then course correction here is what is required, that you need to focus first on your DAF, and DAF, not just the words that you see are written, but also go inside, 10 layers between, deeper down, and then you will come to know what can actually be inspired from your DAF. Those questions becomes very important. And then try to link your answers with your life. So for example, I was asked a question regarding what fundamental right do you find is the most interesting. So I said right to equality. And I also linked it to how I related to women empowerment and how I see an opportunity of women empowerment in that. So we can always do that.
Okay, fine. After going through your preparation, one thing that I would like to tell to my students also is that, see, don't become very methodological in the preparation. Be organic and be ready to play your strength, right? Because it is your effort, your personalized effort, that actually made sure that you are scoring this high. And I would really like to thank you for these inspirational words, these strategies that you have shared with us. And I hope that you will turn out to be an officer of the officer that you really want to be. All the best for the future.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.